Jody, student of class 8. Today we will continue 6th chapter. This is Jody's Fawn. We have previously covered one half of this chapter, my dear students, and from today we'll see it's another part, right? So that's on part number 3. You have to see from today. Movement directly in front of him startled him so that he tumbled backward. The fawn lifted its face to his. It turned its head with a wide, wondering motion and shook him through with the stare of his liquid eyes. It was quivering. It made no effort to rise or run. Jody could not trust himself to move. He whispered, "It's me." The fawn lifted the nose, scenting him. He reached out one hand and laid it on the soft neck. The touch made him delirious. He moved forward all four until he was close beside it. He put his arms around its body. A light convulsion passed over it, but it did not stir. So the movement directly in front of him startled me, surprised him so that he just got back. Right? And the fawn had tried to lift his face, and when it turned its head with a wide, wondering motion and shook him through with the stare of its eyes, which was full of water, and it was it was shaking, it was slightly, so it made no effort to rise or run, and Jody was not trust that he could move. He whispered that it's me, and then the fawn lifted his nose for scenting him. He reached out one hand and laid it on the soft neck. What was? So this touch made him extremely excited, and he moved forward in all four directions until he was close beside it. He put his arms around the body, and a light shiver passed over it, but it did not stir. So he stroked it. He stroked its sides as gently as though the fawn were china deer, and he might break it. Its skin was very soft. It was very sleek and clean, and had a sweet scent of grass. He rose slowly and lifted the fawn. The ground, its legs hung limply. They were surprisingly long, and he had to hoist the fawn as high possible under his arm. So when he stroked the fawn's sides as gently though the fawn were china deer, and it might break its bones, and its skin was very soft, and it was smooth and shiny, and it was having a scent of grasses. And when he rose slowly, lifted down the fawn from the ground, its legs hung limply, and for their surprise, it was a long, and he had pull up higher fawn as possible as under his arm. Right? He was afraid that it might kick and bleat at sight and smell of its mother. He skirted the clearing and pushed his way into the thicket. It was difficult to fight through with his burden. The fawn's legs caught in bushes, and he could not lift his own with freedom. He tried to shield its face from prickling vines. Its head bobbed and with a stride. His heart thumped with marvel of acceptance of him. He reached the trail and walked as fast as he could until he came to the intersection with the road home. He stopped to rest and set the fawn down on its dangling legs. It wavered on them. It looked at him and bleated. Now after this, he was very afraid. And afraid for what? That it may be kick or bleat at the sight and the smell of its mother. Maybe it is having a smell of his mother. That's why he skirted the clearing and pushed his way into the thicket. And it was very difficult to fight through with his burden. because the fawn's legs caught in the bushes and he couldn't lift his own with freedom. He tried to shield its face from prickling vines, and its head bobbed with his stride. His heart thumped with the marvel of its acceptance of him. He reached the trail and walked as fast as he could until he came to the intersection. He came to the square with the road home. And when he reached at the square, he stopped for rest and set the fawn down on its dangling legs. And what happened after? It wavered on them and it looked at him and bleated. So he said, enchanted, I will carry you after I get my breath. He remembered his father saying that a fawn would follow if it had been carried. He started away slowly. The fawn stared after him. He came back to it and stroked it and walked away again. It took a few wobbling steps towards him and cried piteously. It was willing to follow him. It belonged to him. It was his own. He was light-headed with his joy. He wanted to fondle it, to run and romp with it, to call to it to come to him. He dared not alarm. He picked it up and carried it in front of him over his two arms. It seemed to him that he walked without effort. Here Jody said that he will carry him with himself after having a rest, and then the fawn is staring after him, and at that time Jody's remember that what his father said, and its father said that if if it had been carried, it started away slowly, right? And he came back to it and stroked at it. He walked away again. It took a few wobbling steps towards him and cried piteously. It was willing to follow him. It belonged to him. When so what he remembered that his father said a fawn can follow if it had been carried, and as his father suggested, the fawn started following slowly, right? And after seeing this, Jody became overjoyed. Jody was very overjoyed that the same thing was happening. The fawn is also willing to go with him. So these things make Jody very happy, right? And but see, he did not wanted to take any chance. It seemed to him that he walked without effort. That means he did not want to take any chance. That means here the fawn is very weak, right? And that's why he picked up in his arm. His arm began to ache and he was forced to stop again. When he walked on, the fawn followed him at once. He allowed it to walk a little distance, then picked it up. The distance home was nothing. He could have walked all day into the night, carrying it and watching it follow. He was wet with sweat, but a light breeze blew through the June morning, cooling him. The sky was as clear as spring water in a blue china cup. He came to clearing. It was fresh and green. He came to the clearing. It was fresh and green after the night rain. He fumbled with a latch and was finally obliged to set down the fawn to manage it. Then he had an idea. He would walk into the house, into Penny's bedroom, with the fawn walking behind him. But at the steps the fawn balked and he refused to climb them. He picked it up and went to his father. Penny lay with closed eyes. Here, okay. So, dear student, what you are being, his arm began to ache and he was forced to stop again. That means he was very tired. And when he walked on, the fawn followed him at once. But he allowed fawn to walk on a very little distance, right? And then after he picked it up. Means when he got tired, when his hand started aching, Then he put the fawn for a very little moment. Then after just when he relaxed, he again picked up the fawn, and the same thing was the same pattern was being followed up to the time when he approached towards him. He was almost near to his home, and it was a hot summer June morning, and the air was cooling him. And he came to the clearing, and it was a fresh and green after the night's rain, right? And now what he had an idea that he would walk into the house, into Penny's bedroom. Means secretly he will directly enter in the house to the Penny's room. But at the steps the fawn balked and refused to climb them, and that's why he picked up and went to his father. Penny lay with closed eyes. Jody called, "Pa, look." Penny turned his head. Jody stood beside him. The fawn clutched hard against him. It seemed to Penny that the boy's eyes were as bright as the fawn's. He said, "I am glad you found him." When Jody entered into his pa's room, then he says, "Pa, look." And when Penny turned and have a look over the fawn, he was very happy and said that I am very glad that you found the fawn, because both of them were looking very equal. Jody then went to kitchen. The fawn wobbled after him. A pan of morning milk stood in the kitchen safe. The cream had risen on it. He skimmed the cream into a jug. He poured milk into a small gourd. He held it out to the fawn. He butted it suddenly. Smelling the milk, he saved it precariously from spilling over the floor. He could make nothing of milk in the gourd. He dipped his fingers in the milk and thrust them into the fawn's soft wet mouth. It stuck greedily. When he withdrew them, it bleated frantically and bleated him. He dipped his fingers again and fawn sucked. He lowered them slowly into the milk. The fawn blew and sucked and snorted. It stamped its small hoofs impatiently. As long as he held his fingers below the level of milk, the fawn was content. It closed its eyes dreamily. It was ecstasy to feel its tongue against his hand. Its small tail flicked back and forth. The last of the milk vanished in swirl of a foam and guzzling. So here, my dear students, then Jody went into the kitchen and the fawn followed him. And there a pan of morning milk was stood in the kitchen safe. It was kept there, and it was having a cream over it. So he skimmed the cream into a jug and poured the milk into a small utensils that was made of gold, right? And it was out of the fawn. When it butted it suddenly, smelling the milk. So he saved it precariously from spilling over the floor. The fawn was sniffing the milk, and Jody was trying to save it, right? Trying to save it from being spilled, right? And it could make nothing of the milk in the gourd. So he dipped his fingers in the milk and thrust them into the fawn's soft wet mouth. It sucked greedily. When he withdrew them, it bleated frantically and butted him. Means his fingers were injured. When he dipped his fingers and put it in its wet mouth, his fingers were injured by the fawn. But he dipped his finger again, and his fawn sucked. He lowered them and slowly into the milk. So the fawn blew and sucked and snorted, and it stamped its small hoofs impatiently. So as long as his fingers were blue up, the level of milk is being decreased, and the fawn was content, the fawn was satisfied. It closed its eyes dreamily, and it catches to feel its tongue against his hand. Its small tail flicked back and forth. That means he was feeling very, very comfort there. And the last of milk vanished in a swirl of foam and guzzling. So my dear students, in this sense, you can in this way the lesson has been finished, and now you can say, now you can understand what the story says. The story says the comparison between two things. The first one is a fawn, an animal, and the second one is a boy. So there is a similarity between both of them, then both of them are affectionate towards one each other. Okay, so my dear students, when the lesson has been finished, I will tell you I have tell you the explanation of all the lessons very clearly. Further, you will have to see the videos again and again, but if you are getting any kind of issues in understanding this problem, then you are free to ask. बस ये समझ लो कि इस कहानी को आपको ये बताया गया है कि कैसे एक वो बच्चा जो कि एक फॉन को कभी जंगल में देखता है और फिर वो अपने घर पे आके जिद करने लगता है कि नहीं उसे वो फॉन चाहिए, और फिर अपने पेरेंट्स से जिद करके वो जंगल जाता है और फ़ोन को ढूंढता है, उसे घर ले करके अपने फैमिली मेम्बर की तरह से ट्रीट करने लगता है. सो यही इस कहानी का मोरल था कि कभी भी हमें जानवरों से बेसिकली प्रेम ही करना चाहिए. हम जानवरों से नफ़रत नहीं कर सकते हैं. वी आर नॉट हेयर टू हेट एनी बडी और एनी वन और एनी क्रिएचर. किसी से भी नफ़रत करना हमें नहीं सिखाया जाता है. दैट्स वाई माय डियर स्टूडेंट्स, सो यू मस्ट फॉलो द इंस्ट्रक्शंस, यू मस्ट लिव हियर विथ हैविंग अ काइंड एक्ट. आपके पास जितनी भी दयालुता है, आपके पास जितनी भी गंभीरता है, सहृदयता है, उस सब कुछ आप अपने साथ रखें. दैट इज़ द रियल वे ऑफ लिविंग अ पर्टिकुलर लाइफ. सो डियर स्टूडेंट्स, व्हेन द लेसन हैज़ बीन फिनिश्ड, okay, so I am going to tell you, I will send you the question and answers of this chapter, and from tomorrow onwards the 7th chapter will be started. Up to the time, thank you, have a nice day, Jai Hind.